The dust hung thick in the air as Delilah Larson watched the banker's men throw the last of her belongings onto the dirt road outside the farmhouse that had been her home for 6 years. Her daughter Rose, barely 7 years old, clutched her worn rag doll and pressed herself against her mother's skirts, too frightened to cry anymore. It was the spring of 1878 in Quartz Hill, Arizona Territory, and Delilah's world had just collapsed around her ears. Her husband Thomas had been dead for 8 months, killed in a mining accident that left nothing but debts and broken promises. The bank had been patient at first, but patience only lasted so long when money was involved. "You have until sundown to clear out completely, Mrs. Larson," said Martin Weatherby, the bank's representative, adjusting his spectacles with an air of practiced indifference. "The property belongs to First National now." Delilah wanted to scream at him, to demand how they expected a widow with a child to survive with nothing, but pride kept her spine straight and her chin up. "We will be gone," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her insides. She gathered what she could carry in 2 carpet bags and took Rose's small hand in hers. They walked down the dusty main street of Quartz Hill, past the general store, the saloon, and the church that had offered prayers but little practical help. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and Delilah had no idea where they would sleep that night. Her parents were long dead. Thomas had been an only child, and her only sister had moved to California years ago with no forwarding address. She stopped at the edge of town, setting down the bags to catch her breath. Rose looked up at her with those wide, trusting brown eyes that made Delilah's heart ache. How could she tell her daughter that she had no plan, no money, no future to offer her? "Mama, where are we going?" Rose asked in a small voice. "Somewhere safe, sweetheart," Delilah lied, smoothing her daughter's auburn hair. "Somewhere better." The sound of hoofbeats made her turn. A man on horseback was approaching from the direction of town, leading a pack mule behind him. As he drew closer, Delilah could see he was tall and lean, probably in his late 20s, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of creek water after a storm. He wore a dusty brown hat, work clothes that had seen better days, and a kerchief around his neck. There was something gentle in his expression, despite the hardness that frontier life carved into most men. He reined in his horse a few feet away and tipped his hat. "Madam," he said, his voice a low drawl that held traces of Texas. "Name's Quincy Preston. I was in town getting supplies when I heard what happened at the bank. Terrible thing, putting a woman and child out like that." Delilah stiffened, preparing for whatever proposition usually followed such encounters. Men who approached desperate women rarely had honorable intentions. "We will manage, Mr. Preston. Thank you for your concern." Quincy dismounted and stood a respectful distance away, holding his hat in his hands. "I do not doubt you are strong enough to manage most anything, Mrs. Larson, but managing and having actual help are 2 different things." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I have a ranch about 5 miles west of here. Nothing fancy, but the house is solid and there is plenty of room. I could use help with the domestic side of things, and you could use a roof over your heads. I am proposing a business arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" Delilah asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. Quincy's ears turned slightly red. "The respectable kind, madam. You and your daughter would have your own rooms. I would provide room and board, and you would handle the cooking, cleaning, and such. I have been living like a bachelor for too long, and the place shows it. If anyone in town has questions about propriety, well, we could make the arrangement legal." "Legal," Delilah repeated, not understanding. "Marriage, madam. In name only, of course, unless you decided otherwise down the line. But it would protect your reputation and give your daughter a stable home. I am not asking for anything improper. I am just a lonely rancher who could use the company and help, and you are a woman in need. Seems like we could help each other." Delilah stared at him, wondering if the heat had made her delirious. "You are proposing marriage to a complete stranger. I have been told I am unconventional," Quincy said with a small smile. "But I mean what I say. I have seen too many good people get crushed by bad circumstances in this territory. If I can help, I would like to. No strings attached, Mrs. Larson, just a fair trade of work for security." Rose tugged on Delilah's sleeve. "Mama, I am tired," she whispered, looking down at her daughter's exhausted face, then at their meager belongings, then back at this strange cowboy with his unexpected offer. Delilah made a decision that went against every cautious instinct she possessed. But caution was a luxury she could no longer afford. "If we come with you, Mr. Preston, I want your word as a gentleman that you will respect the boundaries you have outlined. My daughter's safety and well-being are everything to me. You have my word, madam, and I keep my word." He said it with such simple conviction that Delilah found herself believing him. "Then I suppose we have an arrangement," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Quincy's face broke into a genuine smile that transformed his serious features. "That is fine news, Mrs. Larson. Let me help you with those bags." He lifted their belongings easily and secured them to the pack mule, then turned to Rose with a gentle expression. "Young lady, would you like to ride on my horse? His name is Copper, and he is very gentle with children." Rose looked to her mother for permission. Delilah nodded, and Quincy lifted the girl onto the saddle with easy strength. He handed her the reins, keeping his own hand steady on the bridle. "There now, you are in charge. Just hold on tight." They began the walk west, away from Quartz Hill and toward whatever future awaited them. Delilah walked beside the horse, acutely aware of Quincy's presence on the other side. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, but it was filled with questions neither seemed ready to ask. "How long have you had your ranch?" Delilah finally ventured. "About 4 years. My father left me some money when he passed, and I used it to buy the land and stock it with cattle. It is not a big operation, maybe 100 head, but it is mine. Well, ours now, I suppose." He glanced at her. "What brought you and your husband to Arizona Territory?" Thomas heard there were opportunities in the mines. He was always chasing the next big opportunity. She could not keep the bitterness from her voice. "He died chasing one down a mine shaft when the supports gave way. 6 other men died with him. The mining company paid for the funerals but nothing else, said it was the risk every miner accepted." "That is a hard grief to carry," Quincy said quietly. "I am sorry for your loss." "Are you?" Delilah asked, then immediately regretted the sharp tone. "Forgive me, that was unkind." "No offense taken. You have every right to be angry at the world right now." They walked on as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and red. Rose had fallen asleep in the saddle, and Quincy adjusted his hold to keep her steady. The gesture touched something deep in Delilah's chest, a tenderness she had not expected from this stranger who had suddenly become her salvation. The ranch came into view as they crested a small rise. It was modest but well maintained, with a main house made of adobe and wood, a barn, a chicken coop, and several corrals. Mountains rose in the distance, purple against the darkening sky. A windmill turned slowly in the evening breeze, its rhythmic creaking the only sound besides their footsteps. "It is not much," Quincy said, a note of uncertainty in his voice, "but it is solid and paid for." "It is beautiful," Delilah said, and meant it. After the prospect of sleeping under a bush, this looked like a palace. Quincy carried Rose inside while Delilah followed with one of the bags. The interior was dim and cluttered in the way of a man living alone, but it was clean enough. The main room served as kitchen and living area, with a fireplace on one wall and a rough wooden table in the center. Quincy led them down a short hallway to 2 bedrooms. "This one here is yours," he said, pushing open a door to reveal a small but adequate room with a bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the front yard. "The one next to it is smaller, perfect for the little one. I will take the room at the other end of the hall. There is also a bathing room out back, though the water has to be heated on the stove first." He laid Rose gently on the bed, and the girl barely stirred. Delilah smoothed her daughter's hair, overwhelmed by the sudden safety of 4 walls and a door that locked. "I will give you time to settle in," Quincy said. "There is bread and some cold beef in the kitchen if you are hungry. We can talk about the other arrangements tomorrow. For tonight, just rest." After he left, closing the door softly behind him, Delilah sank onto the bed beside Rose and let herself cry for the first time since Thomas had died. She cried for the loss and the fear and the uncertainty, but also from relief so profound it hurt. When she finally stopped, she removed Rose's shoes and covered her with a quilt, then walked to the window and looked out at the darkening land. What had she agreed to? Marriage to a stranger. It was insane, impulsive, and completely unlike her usual careful nature. But what choice had she truly had? The street, the charity of the church, which would have separated her from Rose, working in one of the saloons, which was the only employment available to desperate women in frontier towns. No, Quincy Preston's offer, however strange, was the best option she had been given. Perhaps the only option. She found him sitting at the kitchen table, writing something by lamplight. He looked up when she entered and quickly stood, the manners of someone raised properly still evident despite his rough clothes. "Rose is asleep," Delilah said. "Thank you for your kindness to her. She seems like a sweet child." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Will you sit? There are details we should discuss." Delilah sat, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from trembling. Quincy pushed a piece of paper across the table. "I thought we should have an agreement in writing," he said, "just so everything is clear and proper." "I wrote down what I said earlier about the arrangement. Room and board for you and Rose in exchange for domestic help. Separate bedrooms, respectful treatment. And if you want to make it a legal marriage for propriety's sake, we can ride into town tomorrow and see the justice of the peace. But I want you to know there is no obligation beyond what you are comfortable with." Delilah read the paper, surprised by the neat handwriting and clear language. "You have thought this through?" "I have been thinking about it for a while, actually. Not specifically you, but the general idea. It is lonely out here and I could use help. There are a few widows and single women in town, but none who seemed interested in ranch life. When I heard what happened to you today, it seemed like fate was putting us in each other's paths. You believe in fate, Mr. Preston. Sometimes. Do you?" "I am not sure what I believe anymore," Delilah admitted. 6 months ago I thought I knew how my life would unfold. Now I am sitting in a stranger's kitchen discussing a marriage of convenience like it is the most normal thing in the world. "Nothing about life in the Arizona Territory is normal," Quincy said with a slight smile. "That is part of its appeal." Despite everything, Delilah felt her lips curve upward. "I suppose you are right about that." She picked up the pencil he had laid on the table. "If I sign this, if we go through with this marriage, I want one thing added." "What is that?" "If either of us wants to end the arrangement, we can. A divorce might be scandalous, but I will not be trapped again." Quincy nodded slowly. "That is fair, I will add it." He wrote a few more lines, then slid the paper back to her. "Anything else? Rose comes first. In every decision, every circumstance, she has to come first." "I would expect nothing less from a good mother," Quincy said. Is there anything else? Delilah thought for a moment, then shook her head. I think that covers it. They both signed the paper, and Quincy folded it carefully and placed it in a wooden box on a shelf. There. All official, or as official as it can be before we see the justice tomorrow. You really want to do this tomorrow? Delilah asked, sudden nerves making her stomach flutter. No point in waiting. The sooner it is legal, the sooner your reputation is protected. Small towns talk, Mrs. Larson. Best not to give them anything to talk about. He was right, of course. Delilah had lived in small towns long enough to know how quickly gossip could spread and destroy a woman's standing. Then, tomorrow it is. They sat in silence for a moment, the reality of what they were doing settling over them like the desert dust that coated everything in this territory. Why did you really do this? Delilah asked quietly. There must be easier ways to find help for your ranch. Quincy was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. My mother was a widow for a time before she married my father. Her first husband died of cholera, and she was left with nothing and 2 small children. She told me once that if a man named Samuel had not given her work in his store and treated her with respect, she might not have survived. Samuel eventually moved on, but my mother never forgot his kindness. She said it taught her that sometimes God puts us in a position to help, and we should not ignore it. What happened to her children? Delilah asked. They died that same cholera outbreak that took her husband. By the time my father married her, it was just her. She had 5 more children with my father, and I was the youngest. She died when I was 16, but I have never forgotten her stories. He looked directly at Delilah. So when I saw you standing there with your daughter, with everything you owned in 2 bags and nowhere to go, I heard my mother's voice telling me to be like Samuel, to help because I could. Delilah felt tears prickling her eyes again. Your mother sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was. Quincy stood and stretched. It has been a long day. I should let you rest. The chickens will need tending in the morning, and I have to ride out to check on the herd. If you are too tired to cook, there is enough bread and preserves to get us through breakfast. I can cook, Delilah said, rising as well. That is part of the arrangement, after all. The arrangement does not start until after the wedding, Quincy said with a slight smile. Until then, you are a guest. He bid her good night and disappeared into his room at the far end of the hall. Delilah returned to the room she would share with Rose for now and quietly changed into her nightgown. As she lay in the darkness listening to her daughter's soft breathing, she marveled at the strangeness of life. This morning she had woken in the house she had shared with Thomas, and tonight she would sleep under the roof of a man she had met only hours ago. Tomorrow she would marry that man in a ceremony devoid of love or romance, simply as a practical solution to practical problems. Yet there was something about Quincy Preston that made her feel safer than she had in months. Maybe it was his straightforward manner or his obvious kindness to Rose. Maybe it was the story about his mother. Or maybe she was just so desperate that she was seeing virtue where there was only opportunism. Time would tell. Sleep came eventually, deep and dreamless. Morning arrived with the sound of a rooster crowing and sunlight streaming through the window. Rose woke slowly, confused at first by the unfamiliar surroundings, then remembering with a child's quick adaptability. "Mama, are we really going to live here?" she asked, excitement replacing confusion. "Yes, sweetheart. Mr. Preston has been kind enough to offer us a home." "Is he going to be my new papa?" The question caught Delilah off guard. "It is complicated, Rose. He's going to be my husband, but that does not mean he is replacing your papa. Your papa will always be your papa." Rose considered this with the seriousness of a child trying to understand adult matters. "Can I call him Quincy?" That would be a question for him. They dressed and ventured into the kitchen to find Quincy already up, coffee brewing on the stove. He had shaved and changed into cleaner clothes, though they were still the practical garments of a working rancher. "Morning," he said, looking almost shy. "I hope you slept well." "Better than I expected," Delilah admitted. "Thank you, Mr. Quincy." Rose asked, approaching him with her doll clutched in her arms. "Mama says I should ask if I can call you Quincy instead of Mr. Preston." Quincy crouched down to her level. "I would be honored if you called me Quincy. And what is your doll's name?" "Margaret," Rose said. "My papa gave her to me before he died." "That is a fine name. Does Margaret like chickens? Because I have to collect eggs this morning and I could use an assistant if your mama says it is all right." Rose looked at Delilah with pleading eyes. "Can I, Mama?" "Stay close to Quincy and do what he says," Delilah instructed. She watched through the window as Quincy patiently showed Rose how to reach under the hens for eggs, laughing when one particularly cranky bird pecked at his hand. Her daughter's delighted giggles carried through the morning air, and Delilah felt some of the tension in her shoulders ease. Whatever else this arrangement was, Quincy Preston was genuinely kind to her child, and that counted for more than she could express. She busied herself making breakfast from what she could find in the kitchen. The pantry was surprisingly well stocked with basics: flour, cornmeal, beans, salt pork, coffee, and various preserved goods. She made flapjacks and fried some bacon, and by the time Quincy and Rose returned with a basket of eggs, the table was set and steaming plates waited. "This smells wonderful," Quincy said, genuine appreciation in his voice. "I have been eating my own cooking for so long I forgot what good food tastes like." They ate together, an oddly domestic scene that felt both strange and natural. Quincy asked Rose about her doll and her favorite things to do, drawing the girl out with patient questions. Delilah watched him carefully, still not quite believing this was happening but grateful nonetheless. After breakfast, Quincy hitched the horse to a small wagon. "We should head into town. The Justice of the Peace usually holds court on Tuesdays, and we are in luck because today is Tuesday." The ride back to Quartz Hill was quiet. Delilah wore her best dress, which was not saying much after months of wearing the same few garments in rotation. Rose sat between them, swinging her legs and humming a tune Delilah recognized from church. The normalcy of it all made the situation feel even more surreal. The Justice of the Peace, a portly man named Judge Carlson, raised his eyebrows when they stated their business, but asked no questions beyond the legal requirements. A clerk and a woman who cleaned the courthouse served as witnesses. The ceremony took less than 10 minutes. Quincy produced a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother, and Delilah accepted it with trembling fingers. When the judge pronounced them man and wife, Quincy gave her the briefest, most respectful kiss on the cheek, hardly more than a brush of his lips against her skin. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Preston," Judge Carlson said, handing them the marriage certificate. "May you have a long and happy union." As they left the courthouse, several townspeople stared openly. Delilah held her head high, her hand resting lightly on Quincy's offered arm. They stopped at the general store for a few supplies, and Mrs. Henderson, the storekeeper's wife, could not contain her curiosity. "Mrs. Larson, I heard you had some troubles yesterday, and now you are Mrs. Preston. My, that was quick." "Sometimes Providence moves quickly, Mrs. Henderson," Delilah said calmly. "Mr. Preston was kind enough to offer me and my daughter a fresh start, and I was wise enough to accept." "Well, I suppose a woman in your position could not be too choosy," Mrs. Henderson said with a sniff. Quincy stiffened beside her. "My wife had plenty of choices, Mrs. Henderson. She chose to marry me, and I count myself fortunate," Now, if you will excuse us, we have business to attend to." He guided Delilah out of the store with a firm but gentle hand. Once they were outside, he muttered, "That woman could teach a magpie about gossip." Despite herself, Delilah laughed. "Every town has a Mrs. Henderson. Does not make them any less irritating." He helped her up onto the wagon seat. "Are you all right? That was rude of her." "I have endured worse," Delilah said, "but thank you for defending me." They collected Rose from the hotel restaurant where they had left her with a cookie and a glass of milk, then headed back to the ranch. This time Delilah looked at the land with different eyes. This was her home now, her daughter's home. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. Over the following days, they settled into a routine. Delilah rose early to make breakfast, tended the kitchen garden and chickens, did the washing and mending and prepared meals. Quincy worked the ranch from sunrise to sunset, repairing fences, tending cattle, breaking horses, and handling the endless tasks that came with running a small ranch alone. Rose played in the yard, helped collect eggs, and slowly began to lose the haunted look that had shadowed her eyes since her father's death. They were polite to each other, even friendly, but there was a carefulness in their interactions. They were still strangers learning to share a space and a life. Quincy always knocked before entering a room, always gave Delilah and Rose privacy, always treated them with respect. But there was a distance too, a wall that neither seemed ready to cross. One evening, about 2 weeks after the wedding, Delilah found Quincy on the porch watching the sunset. She brought him a cup of coffee and sat in the chair beside his. "Thank you," he said, accepting the cup. "You did not have to. I know." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes. "Can I ask you something, of course? You regret this, taking us in, marrying me? I know it must be strange having your life turned upside down by two people you barely know." Quincy turned to look at her, his expression serious. "I do not regret it at all. Do you?" "No," Delilah said, surprising herself with how quickly and firmly the word came. "I was terrified at first, and sometimes I still am. But you have been nothing but kind and honorable. Rose adores you, and I am grateful every day that you stopped on that road." "She is a special little girl," Quincy said softly. "She asked me today if I could teach her to ride properly. I told her I would if you approved." "You do not need my permission for everything," Delilah said. "She is your daughter. Your permission matters. She is part of this family now, just as I am. That makes her part yours too if you want." The words came out more intensely than she intended. Quincy met her eyes. "I would be honored to be part of Rose's life, and yours." Something shifted between them in that moment, something subtle but significant. The wall did not come down entirely, but a door opened in it. As spring turned to summer, the distance between them gradually narrowed. They talked more, sharing stories about their pasts. Delilah learned that Quincy had grown up in Texas, the youngest of 5 children. His father had been a blacksmith, his mother a teacher before marriage. He had come to Arizona territory seeking his own path, tired of being the baby of the family. He loved the land, the hard work, the independence. Quincy learned that Delilah had been raised in Missouri by strict but loving parents. She had met Thomas at a church social when she was 17. He had been charming and full of big dreams, and she had been young enough to believe dreams were the same as plans. They had married quickly and moved west chasing those dreams. Rose had been born a year later in a drafty cabin in Colorado. They had moved 3 times in 6 years, always following Thomas's next big opportunity. She had loved him, but by the end, she had also resented him for never being satisfied, never settling, never seeing what he already had. "I feel guilty about that," she admitted one evening as they sat on the porch after Rose had gone to bed. He is dead and I am angry at him." "What kind of person does that make me?" "A human one," Quincy said. "We are allowed to have complicated feelings about people, even people we loved, especially people we loved. Did you ever love someone?" The question slipped out before Delilah could stop it. "I am sorry, that is too personal." "No, it is all right." Quincy stared out at the darkening sky. "There was a girl back in Texas, Rebecca. We talked about getting married, but her father did not think I had good enough prospects. When I decided to come west, she would not come with me. She married a banker's son 6 months later. I was hurt at the time, but looking back, we were not suited. She wanted security and society, and I wanted land and sky. Do you ever regret not fighting harder for her?" "Sometimes. But mostly I think things worked out the way they were supposed to." He glanced at her. "If I had stayed in Texas, I would not have this ranch, and I would not have met you." Delilah felt warmth spread through her chest. "That is a kind thing to say. I mean it." His voice was quiet but sincere. The summer heat intensified, and with it came the endless work of keeping a ranch running. Quincy hired 2 ranch hands for the cattle drive to market, a grueling 3-week journey that would take him away from the ranch. He was clearly worried about leaving Delilah and Rose alone. "We will be fine," Delilah assured him. "I can handle things here. The garden needs tending and the chickens will not stop laying just because you are gone." "There is a rifle above the door," Quincy said. "Do you know how to shoot?" "Thomas taught me." "I am not an expert, but I can hit what I am aiming at if I need to." The nearest neighbors are the Michaels, about 3 miles south. "If you need anything, ride over there. Jonas Michaels is a good man, and his wife Sarah would be happy for the company." "Quincy, we will be fine," Delilah repeated, touched by his concern. "You worry about getting the cattle to market safely." He left at dawn the next morning. Rose cried a little, and Delilah was surprised to find her own throat tight as she watched him ride away. In the few months they had been living together, she had grown accustomed to his presence, his quiet strength, his easy way with Rose. The house felt emptier without him. The first week passed uneventfully. Delilah kept busy with the garden, the chickens, and the endless domestic tasks. She visited the Michaels as Quincy had suggested, and Sarah Michaels proved to be a warm, friendly woman close to Delilah's own age. She had 3 children, all boys, and was delighted to have Rose to play with them. "You are lucky to have caught Quincy Preston," Sarah said as they sat on her porch watching the children play. "He is a good man. Half the single women in the territory have had their eyes on him." "I did not catch him so much as he rescued me," Delilah said honestly. "Sometimes being rescued is the beginning of something real," Sarah said with a knowing smile. "Give it time." The second week brought a fierce thunderstorm that threatened to flood the creek running through Quincy's property. Delilah spent a frantic afternoon moving the chickens to higher ground and securing everything that could blow away. When the storm finally passed, she was soaked and exhausted but triumphant. Everything had survived. That night, lying in bed listening to the rain on the roof, she realized she was thinking of the ranch as home. Not Quincy's ranch, but home. Somewhere along the way, without her noticing, she had stopped feeling like a guest and started feeling like she belonged. The third week dragged. She found herself watching the horizon for a familiar figure on horseback. Rose asked every day when Quincy would be back. Delilah told her soon, but inside she wondered too. He returned on a Tuesday afternoon, dusty and tired but grinning. The cattle drive had been successful. He had good news about the money and a bag of peppermint sticks for Rose. He also had a package wrapped in brown paper that he handed to Delilah almost shyly. "I saw this in town and thought of you," he said. Inside was a beautiful shawl, soft wool dyed a deep blue that reminded her of twilight. It was the kind of luxury she had not owned in years. "Quincy, this is too much," she protested, even as her fingers stroked the soft fabric. "It is not too much. You work hard and you deserve something nice." He looked uncertain. "If you do not like it, I can take it back." "I love it," Delilah said quickly. "Thank you." That evening at supper, Rose chattered about everything that had happened while Quincy was gone, and he listened with patient attention. After Rose went to bed, Quincy and Delilah sat on the porch as had become their habit. "I missed this," Quincy said quietly. "The drive was successful, but I was ready to come home. I kept thinking about you and Rose, wondering if you were all right." "We missed you too," Delilah admitted. "The house was too quiet." "Delilah," Quincy said, turning to face her. "This arrangement we have, it has been working well, better than I expected, but I want to be honest with you about something." Her heart began to pound. "What is it?" "Somewhere along the way, this stopped feeling like an arrangement to me. You are not just someone helping with the ranch. You and Rose have become important to me, more than important." He took a breath. "I have feelings for you, real feelings, and I understand if you do not feel the same way. Our agreement said no obligations, and I mean to honor that, but I had to tell you the truth." Delilah's breath caught. She had been trying not to acknowledge her own growing feelings, telling herself it was just gratitude and proximity. But watching him with Rose, sitting with him in the evenings, missing him while he was gone, it had all added up to something she had not expected to feel again. "I have been telling myself I was being foolish," she said slowly. "That it was too soon after Thomas, too soon after we met, too practical to be real. But the truth is, I have feelings for you too, Quincy. You have been kinder to me and Rose than I had any right to expect. You have made us feel safe and valued, and I think I started falling in love with you without realizing it." Quincy reached for her hand, and she let him take it. His palm was calloused and warm. "We can take this as slowly as you need," he said. "I do not want to rush you or make you uncomfortable." "I think we have been taking it slowly for months," Delilah said with a small laugh. "Maybe it is time to stop being so careful." He leaned toward her, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and kissed her gently. It was nothing like the brief peck at their wedding. This was real, warm, full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "I have been wanting to do that for weeks," Quincy admitted. "Only weeks," Delilah teased. "I have been thinking about it for at least a month." They sat together, hands intertwined, and talked until the stars came out. They discussed their hopes for the ranch, their dreams for Rose's future, and the tentative shape of their life together now that it could be based on affection rather than convenience. Over the following weeks, their relationship blossomed. They were still respectful, still careful around Rose, but there was a tenderness between them now that had not existed before. Quincy moved his things into Delilah's room, and she marveled at how natural it felt to share her space with him. He was considerate and gentle, and on the nights when nightmares about Thomas's death woke her, he held her until she could sleep again. Rose noticed the change and seemed delighted by it. "Are you and Mama really married now?" she asked Quincy one morning. "We were always really married," Quincy said, lifting her onto the fence so she could watch him work with a young horse. "But yes, now we are married in our hearts too." "Good," Rose declared. "I like it better when people are happy." Fall arrived, painting the desert in shades of gold and orange. Delilah discovered she was pregnant in October, a realization that brought both joy and fear. Rose had been a difficult birth, and the doctor had warned her that another pregnancy could be dangerous. But she was also 31 years old, and this might be her last chance for another child. She told Quincy that evening after Rose was asleep. He pulled her into his arms, and she felt his joy in the strength of his embrace. "Are you happy?" she asked. "So happy I could burst," he said. "Are you?" Yes, and terrified. Why terrified? She told him about Rose's birth, about the long labor and the doctor's warnings. I am not young anymore, Quincy. What if something goes wrong? Then we will face it together, he said firmly. But I believe you are strong enough to do this, and we will get you the best care possible. We have the money from the cattle sale. We can afford a real doctor, even bring one out from Tucson if needed. His confidence bolstered her own. We are really doing this, having a baby. We are really doing this. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. A whole new person. Part you, part me. Rose is going to be so excited, Delilah said. They told her at breakfast the next morning. Rose's eyes went wide and then she squealed with delight. A baby! A real baby! Will it be a brother or sister? We will not know until the baby arrives, Delilah said. What would you like? I do not care, Rose declared. I will love them either way. Can I help take care of it? You will be the best big sister, Quincy assured her. The pregnancy progressed smoothly at first. Delilah had some morning sickness, but nothing too severe. Her body remembered what to do, and Quincy was attentive without being smothering. He hired a woman from town to help with the heavier household tasks, and Sarah Michaels visited often, sharing advice and hand-me-down baby clothes from her own children. Winter came, cold and harsh. Snow fell in the mountains and the wind howled across the desert. Delilah grew rounder, and Quincy's hand on her belly became a nightly ritual. He talked to the baby, telling it about the ranch, about Rose, about the life waiting for it. You think it can hear me? He asked one night. I think so, Delilah said. I remember Rose responding to Thomas's voice. I want this child to know me from the beginning, Quincy said. To never doubt that I chose them, chose you, chose this family. Delilah felt tears prick her eyes. You are going to be a wonderful father. I hope so. I have never done this before. Thomas had never done it before either, and he managed. You will more than manage. You will be wonderful. In February, when Delilah was about 7 months along, a late winter storm trapped them inside for 3 days. The wind piled snow against the windows, and they huddled by the fire with blankets and hot coffee. Rose played with her doll. Quincy read aloud from a book of adventure stories, and Delilah knitted tiny clothes for the baby. It was cozy and domestic, and Delilah marveled at how different her life was from a year ago. Are you happy? Quincy asked her during a quiet moment while Rose napped. Happier than I ever thought I would be again, Delilah said honestly. You gave me and Rose a second chance at everything. How could I not be happy? I got a second chance too, Quincy said. A chance at a real family, a real partnership. You brought life into this house. Before you came, I was just existing. Now I am living. They kissed, and the baby kicked between them, making them both laugh. The storm finally broke, and life returned to normal. The winter dragged on, cold and monotonous. Delilah grew increasingly uncomfortable as the baby got bigger. Her back ached constantly, and she waddled more than walked. But Quincy and Rose were patient and helpful, and she counted down the weeks until her due date in late March. The baby came early, on a warm afternoon in mid-March. Delilah had been hanging laundry when the first pains hit. Sarah Michaels, who had been visiting, immediately took charge. She sent Rose to fetch Quincy from the far pasture and helped Delilah into the house. The labor was long and difficult, just as Rose's had been. Quincy arrived to find Delilah in considerable pain, and his face went pale. Should I get a doctor? He asked Sarah. No time, Sarah said calmly. This baby is coming today, and we will manage just fine. You keep her calm and comfortable. I will handle the rest. Quincy held Delilah's hand through every contraction, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, murmuring encouragement. She clung to him, drawing strength from his presence. The pain was immense. worse than she remembered, but Sarah was capable and confident finally. As the sun began to set, a baby's cry filled the room. Sarah wrapped the infant in a clean blanket and placed the child in Delilah's arms. "You have a son," she announced with a tired smile. Delilah looked down at the red, wrinkled face of her son and felt love overwhelm her. Quincy leaned over them both, his eyes wet with tears. "He is perfect," Quincy whispered. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Delilah asked. They had discussed names but never quite agreed on one. Quincy looked at his son with wonder. "What about James? After your father?" Delilah's father had died when she was 15, but she still missed him. "James Preston, I like that." Rose was allowed in to meet her brother, and she approached with appropriate awe. "He is so tiny," she breathed. "Can I hold him?" Quincy helped her sit in a chair and carefully placed James in her arms. Rose looked down at him with fierce protectiveness already evident in her young face. "I will take care of you," she told him seriously. "I will be the best big sister ever." Over the following weeks, they adjusted to life with an infant. James was a good baby, relatively calm except when hungry. Delilah nursed him and marveled at how different this experience was from Rose's birth. Then she had been alone with Thomas, often away working. Now she had a partner who truly shared the load. Quincy changed nappies, walked the floor with James when he fussed at night, and never complained about the disruption to their routine. "This is what it should be," Delilah told Sarah during one of her visits. "Thomas loved Rose, but he never helped like this. I did everything alone." "You have a good man," Sarah agreed, watching Quincy through the window as he showed Rose how to feed a new calf. "One who understands that family is a partnership." Spring arrived in full force, bringing warmth and new life to the ranch. The cattle were calving, the garden was flourishing, and James was growing bigger and more alert every day. Rose doted on him, and Quincy was a natural father. Delilah had never seen him happier than when he held his son. "Our son," he always corrected when she said it. "He is ours." One evening in May, after both children were asleep, Quincy and Delilah sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. "You remember this time last year?" Quincy asked. "I was just getting used to being here," Delilah said, still not quite believing this was real. "And now I cannot imagine being anywhere else." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You saved us, Quincy. You gave us a home, a family, a future. I will never be able to repay that." "You already have," he said, kissing her forehead. "You made this house a home. You gave me Rose and James. You gave me love when I was not even sure I believed in it anymore. That is more than repayment. That is grace." They sat in comfortable silence, the sounds of the desert night around them. An owl hooted in the distance. The windmill creaked its familiar rhythm. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully. "I love you," Delilah said. "I do not say it enough, but I do, completely and truly." "I love you too," Quincy replied. "I loved you when you were just a scared woman on the side of the road, and I love you now as my wife and the mother of my children. And I will love you when we are old and gray and Rose brings her own children to visit." "That is a beautiful future to imagine," Delilah said softly. "Then let us live it," Quincy said. "Every day, let us live it." The years that followed were filled with the ordinary joys and challenges of ranch life. James grew from baby to toddler, walking at 10 months and getting into everything. Rose started school in town, riding with Quincy 3 days a week to the one-room schoolhouse. The ranch prospered under Quincy's careful management and Delilah's domestic skills. They added more cattle, improved the house, and became respected members of the Quartz Hill community. When James was 3, Delilah found herself pregnant again. This time there was less fear and more excitement. The pregnancy was easier, and in late winter, she delivered a daughter they named Grace. She had Quincy's gray eyes and Delilah's auburn hair, and she ruled the household from the moment she arrived. Rose was 9 by then, old enough to be a real help with her baby sister. James was jealous at first, but quickly became protective. Watching her children together, watching Quincy with all 3 of them, Delilah often had to pinch herself to believe her life was real. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Quincy surprised her with a trip to Tucson. Jonas Michaels agreed to watch the children for 3 days, and Quincy and Delilah had their first time alone together since James was born. They stayed in a real hotel with indoor plumbing, ate in a restaurant, and walked through shops hand in hand like courting sweethearts. "I never properly courted you," Quincy said as they watched the sunset from their hotel window. "We went straight from strangers to married. I have always regretted that you did not get flowers and poetry and all the romantic things a woman should have." "You gave me something better," Delilah said. "You gave me security when I had none, respect when I was desperate, love when I had given up on finding it again. That is more romantic than 1,000 flowers." "Still, I want you to know I see you," Quincy said, pulling her close. "Not just as my wife or the mother of my children. I see you, Delilah. Your strength, your kindness, your intelligence. You made me better just by being in my life. And you made me believe in new beginnings," Delilah replied, "in second chances and unexpected blessings." They made love that night with a tenderness and passion that had only deepened over the years. Afterward, lying in the comfortable hotel bed, Delilah thought about the terrified woman she had been 5 years ago, standing on the road with nothing but 2 carpet bags and a frightened child. That woman would never have believed this could be her life. When they returned home, the children greeted them with shrieks of joy. Rose had a story about James letting the chickens out. James had a skinned knee from a fall, and Grace had learned to clap her hands. It was chaotic and loud and absolutely perfect. Life continued its rhythm. Rose grew into a capable young woman, smart and kind like her mother. James was all energy and curiosity, constantly asking questions and getting into mischief. Grace was the baby, spoiled by everyone but somehow managing not to be spoiled rotten. They had good years and hard years, droughts that tested their resilience and abundant seasons that rewarded their hard work. When Rose was 16, a young man from a neighboring ranch began calling on her. His name was Daniel, and he was respectful and hardworking. Delilah watched her daughter fall in love and remembered her own courtship with Thomas, so different from what she had built with Quincy. She hoped Rose would have what Delilah had now, not what she had settled for at 17. "He is a good boy," Quincy said, watching Daniel help Rose down from the wagon. "Reminds me of myself at that age." "He better be good," Delilah said, "or he will answer to her father." Quincy smiled. "I like that you call me her father." "You are her father in every way that matters," Delilah said. "Thomas gave her life, but you taught her how to live." On their 10th anniversary, the whole family celebrated with a party at the ranch. The Michaels family came, along with other neighbors and friends from town. There was music and dancing and enough food to feed twice as many people. Quincy and Delilah danced together under the stars, and she thought about that first awkward wedding in the judge's chambers, how far they had come since then. "No regrets?" Quincy asked, echoing a question from years ago. "Not a single one," Delilah said. "You?" "Only that I did not find you sooner," Quincy replied. "Think of all the time we missed." "We have the time that matters," Delilah said. "The rest of our lives." Rose married Daniel when she was 18, a beautiful ceremony in the church in Quartz Hill. Delilah cried watching her daughter pledge her life to someone else, but they were happy tears. Daniel had proved himself worthy, and Rose glowed with happiness. James grew tall and strong, more interested in books than ranching. Quincy encouraged this, arranging for tutors and saving money for university. "The world is changing," he told Delilah. "Our children should have every opportunity." Grace was the social one, always organizing gatherings and making friends wherever they went. She had a gift for bringing people together, and even as a child, she dreamed of opening a restaurant or hotel someday. The years rolled on. Delilah and Quincy weathered storms both literal and figurative. There were hard times, conflicts with neighboring ranchers over water rights, years when the cattle prices dropped and money was tight. But they faced everything together, their partnership stronger than any challenge. Rose had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, and brought them to visit often. James went east to college, studying law, and came back during summers full of new ideas and perspectives. Grace helped at the ranch and in town, earning money for her dream restaurant. On their 20th anniversary, Quincy took Delilah back to the spot where they had first met. The road was the same, dusty and unremarkable, but everything else had changed. 20 years ago, I saw a woman and a child standing right here, Quincy said, and I made a decision that changed my entire life. We both made that decision, Delilah reminded him. I could have said no. But you did not. You trusted me when you had no reason to. You took a chance on a strange cowboy with a crazy offer. Best decision I ever made, Delilah said, taking his hand. That cowboy gave me everything. We gave each other everything, Quincy corrected. I was half a person before you. You made me whole. They stood there for a long moment, remembering. Then they rode back to the ranch, to their life, to their family. That evening, all 3 children and Rose's 3 little ones gathered for a celebration. The house was full of noise and laughter and love. Delilah looked around the table at these people she loved, this family she had built with Quincy, and felt overwhelming gratitude. 20 years ago, she had been destitute and terrified. Now she was surrounded by abundance, not of money or possessions, but of the things that truly mattered. After the children had gone to bed and Rose had taken her family home, Delilah and Quincy sat on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. "What are you thinking?" Quincy asked. "I am thinking about all the different ways life could have gone," Delilah said. "If you had not been on that road that day, if I had been too proud to accept your help, if we had not been brave enough to turn an arrangement into something real." "I do not believe in regrets," Quincy said, "but if I did, my only regret would be any version of life where I did not have you." "That is very poetic for a cowboy," Delilah teased. "You bring out my poetic side," Quincy replied with a grin. As the stars came out, they talked about their plans for the ranch, about James's upcoming graduation, about Grace's restaurant dreams, about Rose's growing family. They talked about getting older, about eventually passing the ranch to James if he wanted it or selling it if he did not. They talked about traveling, maybe taking that trip to California they had always discussed. "So many dreams still to live," Delilah said. "We have time," Quincy assured her. "We have all the time in the world." The years continued their steady march. James graduated from law school and opened a practice in Tucson, but visited often. Grace saved enough money to open a small restaurant in Quartz Hill, which quickly became the most popular establishment in town. Rose's children grew, and she was expecting a 4th. Quincy and Delilah grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies showing the wear of hard work and long years. But their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened, becoming something so fundamental they could not imagine life without it. On their 30th anniversary, they renewed their vows in the same church where Rose had married Daniel. Their children and grandchildren surrounded them, and this time when they pledged their love, it was with the full knowledge of what those words meant. They had lived through every promise, every vow, every commitment. For richer or poorer, Quincy said, his voice strong despite his 60 years. For better or worse, in sickness and in health. I have meant these words every day since I first spoke them, but they mean even more now. You are the best decision I ever made, Delilah Preston. And you are mine, Delilah replied, tears streaming down her face. You saved me when I was lost. You loved me when I was broken. You built a life with me when I thought my life was over. I love you more today than I did 30 years ago, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. They kissed to thunderous applause from their family and friends. Later, at the celebration, Delilah watched Quincy dance with grace, saw him laugh at one of James's stories, saw him bounce Rose's youngest on his knee. This was the man who had stopped on a dusty road 3 decades ago and offered his ranch and his name to 2 desperate strangers. This was the man who had kept every promise, honored every commitment, and loved her without reservation. As the party wound down and they rode home under a blanket of stars, Delilah leaned against Quincy's shoulder. "You remember what you said that first day?" she asked. "That sometimes God puts us in a position to help and we should not ignore it." "I remember," Quincy said. "I used to think you helped us," Delilah said. "But now I know the truth. We helped each other. I needed you, yes, but you needed us too. We were all broken in different ways and we healed each other." "That is the truth," Quincy agreed. "The best partnerships are the ones where everyone gives and everyone receives. We built something beautiful together, Delilah. A family, a life, a love that will outlast us both." "It will outlast us in our children," Delilah said. "In Rose's kindness, James's wisdom, Grace's joy, they are our legacy." "They are," Quincy said. "But so is this ranch and the life we built here. Every fence I mended while thinking of you, every meal you cooked with love. Every night we sat on that porch talking about everything and nothing. That is legacy too." They reached the ranch and put away the wagon. The house was quiet, waiting for them. They went to their room, the same room they had shared for 30 years, and prepared for bed with the comfortable routine of long marriage. As they lay in the darkness, Delilah reached for Quincy's hand. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For stopping. For offering help. For being brave enough to suggest something crazy. For making me feel safe enough to accept. For 30 years of love and partnership and joy. For everything." "Thank you for saying yes," Quincy replied. "For trusting me, for giving me a family, for turning a house into a home, for loving me. For everything." They fell asleep hand in hand, as they had done thousands of times before and would do thousands of times more. The final years of their lives together were peaceful. They gradually reduced their role in the ranch as James decided he wanted to manage it while still practicing law. He married a woman from Tucson named Elizabeth, and they had 2 children, continuing the Preston line. Grace's restaurant thrived, and she eventually married a chef who had moved to Quartz Hill from California. They expanded the business and made it one of the finest dining establishments in the territory. Rose's family continued to grow, eventually totaling 6 children. She and Daniel built a life much like Delilah and Quincy's, founded on respect, hard work, and genuine love. Delilah and Quincy became the matriarch and patriarch of a large, loving family. They were the ones everyone came to for advice, for comfort, for stories about the old days. They presided over holidays and celebrations, anniversaries and birthdays. Their love was the foundation on which 3 families had been built. One evening, when they were both well into their 70s, they sat on the porch as they had done for over 40 years. The ranch was quieter now, managed mostly by James and his sons, but it was still home. "I have been thinking," Quincy said, "about that day we met, about how I almost did not stop. "Why would you not have stopped?" Delilah asked, surprised. "I had been in town dealing with the bank, and I was frustrated and running late. I almost rode right past you. But something made me look, really look, and I saw you standing there with Rose, and I just knew. I knew you were important somehow." "Fate," Delilah said. "Or providence, or just dumb luck. Whatever it was, I am grateful. So am I." Quincy squeezed her hand. "Every single day I am grateful." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and purple. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren played in the yard. Smoke rose from chimneys. Cattle lowed in the distance. It was an ordinary evening, and it was perfect. "I love you," Delilah said. "I love you too," Quincy replied. Those words, spoken countless times over 40 years, never lost their meaning. They were the foundation of everything, the cornerstone of the life they had built together. They had started as strangers making a practical arrangement, and they had become soulmates who could not imagine existence without each other. As the stars began to appear, they went inside together, hand in hand, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. They had faced everything life threw at them with courage, grace, and unwavering love, and they would continue to do so together until their final days. The Preston family became legendary in Quartz Hill and the surrounding territory. People talked about Quincy and Delilah's love story, about how a desperate widow and a lonely cowboy had found each other and built something extraordinary. Young couples asked them for advice. Children listened wide-eyed to their stories. They became a symbol of hope and second chances, proof that even in the harsh frontier, love could flourish. Quincy passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 79, with Delilah beside him as she had been for 46 years. His last words were, "I love you," and Delilah held his hand as he slipped away. The grief nearly destroyed her. After so many years together, she felt like half of herself had died with him. But she was surrounded by the family they had built, the legacy of their love. Rose stayed with her for weeks. James handled the funeral arrangements. Grace cooked all Delilah's favorite foods and sat with her during the long nights. Slowly, Delilah found her way back to living. She knew Quincy would not want her to give up. He had saved her once from despair, and she would honor his memory by continuing to live fully. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. She told them stories about Quincy, about the ranch, about the Arizona territory in its wild days. She passed on recipes and wisdom and love. When she died at 84, peacefully in the same bed where she had slept beside Quincy for so many years, her family mourned but also celebrated. They celebrated a life well lived, a love story for the ages, and a legacy that would continue for generations. They buried her next to Quincy on a hill overlooking the ranch. The headstone read, "Delilah Preston, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother." She was loved, and she loved well. The ranch continued under James's management, then his children's, then his grandchildren's. The Preston family remained in Quartz Hill for generations, always remembering the story of how it all began. How a cowboy saw a widow and her daughter on a dusty road and decided to stop. How he offered them his ranch and his name, expecting nothing in return. How a frightened woman took a leap of faith and accepted help from a stranger. How an arrangement became a partnership, and a partnership became a love story that would inspire generations. The house still stood, updated and modernized but fundamentally the same. The porch where Quincy and Delilah had spent countless evenings still welcomed family members seeking a moment of peace. The bedroom they had shared became a shrine to their love, preserved as it had been in their lifetime. The ranch itself prospered, a testament to the solid foundation they had laid on special occasions, the family gathered at the ranch, all the descendants of Quincy and Delilah Preston, united by blood and by the story of how their family began. They raised glasses to toast two people who had loved courageously, lived generously, and left a legacy that transcended time, because in the end, that is what true love does. It transcends, it builds, it endures. Quincy and Delilah's love had started from the most practical of circumstances, but it had grown into something beautiful and rare. They had proven that love could bloom in the most unlikely places, between the most unlikely people, and create something that would last forever. Their story became part of Arizona territory legend, passed down through generations. The widow who was evicted with her daughter, the cowboy who offered them his ranch and his name, and the love that grew between them, as vast and enduring as the desert itself, as constant as the stars above, as eternal as the land they had called home. It was a love story worthy of the Wild West, full of courage and hardship, hope and determination. But more than that, it was a testament to the power of human kindness, the possibility of second chances, and the transformative nature of love. Quincy and Delilah Preston had lived and loved well, and their story would never be forgotten.